is as it sounds, where you increment slowly through small changes. Now, I've always thought of myself as being a step change person, i.e. it's either black or white, it's all or nothing. Yet, when I look back at my journey, I began low carb, and then I became dirty keto, then standard keto, then clean keto. My journey towards being carnivore has taken many years. Now I've been carnivore for 5 or 6 years, over a decade into my journey, but it did take me that long to gravitate it down towards being pure carnivore. And even now, only recently, have I actually removed one of the biggest, most damaging compounds that we know of, and coffee. And that isn't coffee, by the way, I was drinking. This was my electrolytes. But so I'm all for that. I think that we should increment the changes. I do believe that the body goes through a detoxification phase where lots of toxins are released into the body. Ideally, I think we should do it this way. But I agree with you, Steve. I think if you've already taken the plunge and you were doing very well, then why not continue and persevere? What I would do is continue along your journey. If you find that you are oxalate detoxing, for example, then maybe look at putting compounds in. First of all, a potassium citrate, because this has a high affinity to oxalate. If you do want to put foods back in that contain oxalate, do it low and slow. So I'd rather take that approach rather than sort of undoing all of the hard work that you've made already. Over to Abs.
Not a lot to add, to be honest. I think you guys have said what I would have said. You just got to go by your symptoms. There's no set template. Listen to your body, and yeah, not a lot to add. I think you've hit the nail on the head.
Great stuff. This is where we don't go on too much. Mary Ann Hill, $4.99. Thank you for the super chat. I don't know which channel's got that, but just to remind people, the super chat will move you up the list there because we appreciate it. And thoughts on the Randle cycle, Marianne? That's a great super chat, but that question needs a little bit more, really.
It's a bit big.
What are my thoughts on the Randle cycle? Do you mean, does it exist? Is it a real thing? Is it something that we need to worry about? Do you want to know how it works? My thoughts on the Randle cycle, as with everything with nuance, does it have any practical utility knowing about it? Right. Do you need to know the mechanism, or do you need to know what it sort of talks about? I think the fact that mixing fats with carbohydrates is a bad idea is pretty much nailed on. It's super palatable. I don't think it's a good way of eating. Dr. Ted Naiman would say, in his way of thinking, it's all about protein and energy. So he says either have protein and carbs or protein and fats. And that's quite a good way of looking at it. But the Randle cycle is reciprocal inhibition of metabolism. That's all. The cell has a certain amount of capacity for producing energy, and if you've got that mixed macro diet and you've got incoming glucose and you've got incoming fats, then it's going to pick and choose depending on what's most efficient what to use, but they can inhibit each other. And that's really the Randle cycle. I think it's a very interesting concept, and it is fascinating if you're into biohacking. So yeah, guys, any additional thoughts on that?
I think the key is it doesn't change what you should be doing in your life in terms of diet and lifestyle. You can really get into the nitty-gritty. In fact, this is what I was doing. I was on a Zoom with Stephen just chatting, I think yesterday or the day before, and one of the things on my laptops came up, and he saw what I was reading, and that was specifically to do with something called CIC transporters, which are like a really, really, really specific thing within this really whole complex Randle cycle. So you can go down massive rabbit holes, but you don't need to. If you're genuinely interested, fine, go for it. But you don't need to do it thinking that it's going to give you some new epiphany in terms of something different you should be eating or doing in your life, which is key, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Spot on. Again, coming back to what you just said, Steve, knowing about it, is it going to make a difference to your life? I think maybe understanding that we should only consume either carb or fat. This is why many athletes that I used to compete against when I was bodybuilding who were carb athletes, they used to succeed and they used to win competitions and gain medals and build muscle because they were doing the opposite to me, in effect. We were both consuming protein, but they were consuming carb. I was consuming protein, but instead of carb, I was consuming fat. When all the way through my journey, I would never compete the two. I would never use the two in conjunction. It would always be either carbohydrate or fat. And the only time that I would put carbohydrate in was for aesthetic purposes, in order to fill the glycogen stores for purely for look, to make me look bigger, which I would also do with fat, by the way. But let's not go down there. So yeah, I agree with both of you. It does exist, but you shouldn't consume carbs if you're consuming fats. They will compete for either. One will store. One will always store if we're consuming both. Yeah, proteins and fats. Eat as nature intended. Everything that nature provides comes with protein and fat. And I think if we look at an ancestrally appropriate approach, it's always protein and fat. Carbs weren't in abundance through our evolutionary period. So if you are going to preference any two, it's got to be the protein and fat.
Brilliant. There you go, Marianne. I think that's a $4.99 answer. Excellent. Hope you got your money's worth. But I do think with those sort of questions, I'd love to go a bit deeper on why you asked that question. So if you want to do that, that's great. So Gaza here, let's put a few things, but let's cut to the chase. Gaza saying, does the max rate of body fat utilization vary much between people? Is this why some people do better eating leaner macro wise? That was dipping into Spanish there, leano. I mean, there is a limiting thing, which is your maximum oxygen capacity. So when we do personal training, which I used to do a lot more than I do now, we knew that there was a sort of limiter, which is something like 47% fat oxidation up to about 64. And that was all down to your oxygen capacity. And we used to do this thing called the VO2 max. Now, how do you improve that? Well, you get fitter, as in your body needs to be able to literally work with oxygen. And this is why training helps. Training doesn't really, I'm going to be controversial, doesn't really get much better until your usage of oxygen does. That's the thing. So if you're out of breath, and I know this sounds really obvious, you can't train much. So it's once your body starts to get really efficient at using the oxygen that's being supplied, do you start to see really big differences. So someone like that's got asthma could be absolutely lean and cut. And if they're having an asthma attack, their performance just goes down. And I'm just using that as an example because it's such an obvious thing to think of. Oh, right. Yeah, they can't breathe properly, so they're going to have a real big problem. And we all know that. In Britain, we have an expression, I'm puffed out, and that's it. You'll get to a point where you can't do anything because you just can't breathe. One of the most scary things that ever happened to me, and I've never revealed this to anybody, when the TV show The Gladiators first came out in the UK, I actually was trying out as a contestant, and we were on the last leg of this, and I was told, wow, if you do this treadmill in X amount of minutes or seconds, you're going to be on the show, because I've done so well on the rest of the show. And of course, being me, I was super competitive when I was younger, or an idiot, depending on how you want to look at it. And I didn't just want to get under that time. I wanted to smash that time. So I was on the treadmill and I was all wired up and doing really well. And I just stopped. Couldn't do it anymore. I ran out of puff, as we say. But I was able to rest momentarily and still carry on. Biggest mistake of my life, because I started to run again and didn't listen to my body signals. And the next thing I know, I'm surrounded by St. John's ambulance men, hyperventilating, sweating beyond belief, and unable to drop my heart rate. It was pretty scary. The thing I really remember more than anything wasn't the heart rate, wasn't the sweating. It was I couldn't catch my breath. And even now, I feel a bit stressed talking about it. So it's a really good question. But anyway, the bottom line is the maximum rate of fat oxidation is absolutely down to your maximum oxygen consumption and utility of that, or utilization of oxygen in your body. But for a bit more nuance and practical, let's go over to the other two guys. How can you improve your utilization of body fat?
I think it's very multifactorial, isn't it? Because what you're talking about is how does your body control its metabolic rate? And if you it's the same question really, but when you say that, you automatically realize there's so many factors. And for example, you can look at the hormones. So insulin is a key hormone, and that regulates both glucose and fat metabolism. Low insulin levels, let's say you're fasting, low carbohydrate diets, or prolonged exercise, they're going to promote more the breakdown of the stored fat into free fatty acids, which can then be used for energy. And glucagon plays a role. It's in opposition to insulin. We've got catecholamines like epinephrine, norepinephrine. Higher levels of these can increase fat mobilization and utilization for the metabolic process. Even things like, say, cortisol, right? If people think of it as a stress hormone, it does a lot more than that. But for the purposes of this, let's say it's that elevated amounts of that can lead to fat accumulation, particularly visceral fat, not just subcutaneous under the skin. What else? Growth hormone. And growth hormone can promote lipolysis and inhibit the uptake of glucose by the fat cells. And obviously, we've got the thing we're all here for, the thing we all have in common, which is the diet as well. So obviously, carb intake, fat intake, the amount of food, or in terms of, say, the volume or the mass, that has a big role as well. Even the requirement for metabolic process. So what do I mean? In terms of how much energy you're spending, in layman's terms. So the exercise and physical activity you're doing. So if you're doing exercise, is it low intensity or is it high intensity? Low could be something like walking. High intensity can be something like interval training, or is it endurance training? Endurance athletes have a very different ability or efficiency to utilize fat than everyone else. Is it resistance training? If you're doing resistance training, if you're building muscle mass, the more muscle mass you have, the more mitochondrial numbers you have in your body. And so the increase in basal metabolic rate. So all these things play a role. And then, like I said, mitochondria, depending on how much inflammation there is in your body and how you've been eating up till that very point, you're going to have a certain level of mitochondrial efficiency or inefficiency, whichever way around you want to look at it. So that will be quite important. Your ability, I said insulin, actually, I've got to say, even the ability to respond to insulin. That's very, very different. So people who can respond very well, or people who can't, who get labeled as insulin resistant, they're going to use fat very, very differently in their body. And then you've got genetic predispositions, age. When you're older, you're going to have a decline in metabolism. Your gender, there's hormonal differences because of the varying levels of, let's say, as an example, testosterone. There's so many different factors, and it's impossible to work it out without having all of those. But in terms of increasing it, as long as you manipulate all those things in one direction, which you should be doing automatically if you're living a sort of carnivore lifestyle, you're going to get there anyway. And when I say get there, you're going to get to the most optimum point that your body will get to automatically, because your dietary and lifestyle choices are now optimum as well, or appropriate for your species, if that makes sense. Long-winded answer, but I think there's many factors to talk about there.
Yeah, I agree. Lots of information. Again, yeah, I agree with the two of you. Glucagon and insulin are going to be two of some of the biggest factors there. We want insulin to be low. When insulin is low, we can upregulate hormone-sensitive lipase, which will break the bonds on the glycerol backbone and allow us to burn fatty acids for fuel. There's, again, hormonal compartments there that Abs has gone into. When we look at adaptation, we can increase this through, as the guy said, by training. There's a zone which we can train in called zone 2. This is the fat burning zone. This will allow us to increase our VO2 max. But it goes beyond beta oxidation also. Beta oxidation is one part of the production of ketones. So beta oxidation produces a compound called acetyl-CoA. Now, under normal circumstances, this would enter the citric acid cycle and go on to create ATP. But when we're ketogenic or carnivore, the citric acid cycle doesn't spin. This cycle doesn't turn as well because we use oxaloacetate for gluconeogenesis, which is where we use substrates like protein and lipid to create glucose, which is essential. We need this. It's essential for life. So acetyl-CoA will build up, and this will enter HMG-CoA and allow us to create ketones. Initially, So coming back, Gaza, to the the adaptation period, we utilize ketones in a different way. We are very inefficient in the early stages. We use and create acetoacetate and acetone, which are wasted ketone bodies. As we adapt, the body utilizes beta hydroxybutyrate, which is the key component, or the creme de la creme, if you like, for ketone production. Now, this is where all of the benefits come from that we see in the research. And in all the early research papers in regards to keto and carnivore, it was done on the supplementation of things like MCT, C8, and BHB supplementation, exogenous ketones, because it was deemed to be very difficult to live the lifestyle. You and I know that now it's incredibly easy, but back then it was deemed to be incredibly difficult. But all of these things were upregulated. For us to use ketones in the form of beta hydroxybutyrate, there is specific pathways, the monocarboxylate transporters, MCTs, not to be confused with medium chain triglycerides. These are upregulated the more that we produce BHB. So the more BHB that we produce, the quicker these are upregulated. And then also are the enzymes that use these, which are BDH, ACAT, and SCOT. As we upregulate this, we can use more ketones and therefore burn more body fat. We look at this quite often as being, our DNA. We're born this way. It runs in my family. This is what I get quite often. If somebody's overweight, well, my parents are all overweight, or my parents suffer with such and such. We can manipulate our DNA. If we were to take a chromosome in the cell and rip it apart, if we were to tear that apart, we would pull apart a little strand of DNA. These strands of DNA are wrapped around proteins or groups of proteins called histones. We can express these histones through methylation. We can create methylation directly to the DNA through the CPG compounds or the attachments, which is the cytosine and guanine within the DNA. We can also apply compounds, molecules to the histone proteins and to the DNA itself to become more expressible. So what happens is, if we picture the DNA wrapped around little reels, they can be tightly bound, allowing the DNA to be tight and not available for expression. But through diet and lifestyle, through something called epigenetics, we can expand these and create looser sort of tails, if you like, looser cycles around these reels, which will allow other parts of DNA to be available for expression. When we do this, we can quite literally flick the switch or pull the lever. That's one of my favorite sayings, isn't it? We can pull the lever for health and well-being. Some of these things that we look at are just genetically predisposed. We can't change our genome. Our DNA is our DNA, but we can change epigenetically. So if we're stuck with fat genes and it runs in our family, we can quite literally pull the lever or flick the switch to be fat burners and to be fit and healthy. And the beauty is that this is achieved through diet and lifestyle, i.e. through a ketogenic or carnivore-based lifestyle. We can upregulate these mechanisms. On top of this, when we are ketogenic, we can increase the activity of UCP1, uncoupling protein 1. This will tell our white fat, which wants to store, quite literally to waste energy in the same way that brown fat does. So by this means of epigenetics, by pulling these levers or flicking these switches, we can quite literally tell our stored white fat just to waste energy. This allows us with some wiggle room, if you like. This, if we were to quantify it as a calorie, or let's call it units of energy. It is different for everybody, but it could be as much as 500 units of energy a day, and possibly even more. But again, through these upregulation processes, we can increase our body's ability to burn fat, which I've noticed myself. When I was cutting and prepping for competition, year one saw slow progression. I didn't cut as lean as I did the year after and the following year, and so on and so forth. Every year that I pushed my body to cut to a leaner condition, I achieved this. Year one was around 8%. By the time I finished competing, it was 2%. So it does take time. It is different for everyone, but there are these levers that we can pull, as the guys have mentioned.
Yeah, brilliant. Now, just to let everybody know, not every single answer will be all three of us, because there's tons of questions. Also, at the end, at 8 o'clock, we do an extra 30 minutes in our school community, and we'll put a link at the end if you want to come over and have some more questions answered. But we do try to give value for money. Gaza was just saying, and I'll just quickly do this one, guys, and then we'll go on to the next question, because Gaza did a 3-parter Can you increase it notably during the course of adaptation or with specific methods such as fat fasting? Yes, fat fasting is effective for some people. And Gaz is asking, how much is your fat fasting food plan, Stephen? I'd love to try this. 30 pounds for the month. But that is not going to be just fat fasting, because you don't just fat fast for a month. You fat fast at specific times. It's all there. It's very interesting, very tasty, and it's one of the most enjoyable ways of eating for a little while. Fat fasting just means, that's exactly what it says, you're not fasting from fat, you're eating fat, and fasting in a sort of way from everything else. Anyway, right, okay, here we go. Rightio. So let's have a look at this. Maria is asking, I won't put my 2 pence in, is there any benefit to taking a quality organic extra virgin olive oil from Morocco? Abs is shaking his head saying no.
Have some C8. That'll be better instead. My short answer.
Yeah, look, it's if you are consuming olive oil, I would consume it cold. But there's nothing in olive oil that we can't obtain naturally through the diet. And I missed the first part. Was this C8 that you said?
Yeah.
C8, yeah, I agree. For energy purposes, C8 is the best. As far as health goes, there are longer chains of fats within the olive oil, but saturated fats. I'll tell you quickly about a study. There was a study that I've referenced in one of the talks. That's what you've got in there as a C8. Perfect. So there's a study that looked at cardiovascular events, comparing vegetable oils, olive oil, and saturated fats, or I think it was maybe lard potentially. And it was done on a group of people who were already susceptible, already had some sort of cardiovascular event. And what they found at the end of this 5-year study, I believe it was, that seed oils basically led to more deaths, all-cause mortality. Olive oil was better, but closely followed. And the saturated fats was right at the lower end of the scale. If you're going to consume fats, animal fats, I believe, are always going to be more beneficial. Olive oil, I think, is better than vegetable oil. But if you're looking for optimal health, I wouldn't consume it either. And I would consume the saturated fats, the butter, tallow, lard, or ghee, for example.
Brilliant. Yes. I just love. Sorry?
Or the C8 as abs.
C8, yeah. I think this is going to be a Richard one. Gemma's asking, I just want to tell a little anecdote. I was out today, street food, loads of things in the market. There was this wonderful big load of sausages, bratwurst and Vienna sausages and all that. And I said to Jane, I might just partake. And in the middle of it was a little bit of a clump of onion. And as I went over to think, should I go off playing a little bit? They had a huge carton, literally, for the audio people. I'm putting my hands up because it was massive, of vegetable oil, and dumped it straight on top of the onions. So I immediately did 180 and off I went. Right. Okay. Gemma Ryan is asking, safe yet effective supplements to assist with sleep. I'm happy for both of you to answer that, but let's go Richard first, shall we?
Awesome. So look, I mean, as far as supplements go, safe and effective may become into 2 different categories. There are lots of things that you can take to help you sleep. I'm not a fan of many of them. I have experimented previously with things like CBD and ashwagandha and so on and so forth. But consuming these compounds over prolonged periods can cause problems, but they can confer a benefit in the short term. No, but for me, to be safe and effective, one of the best things that you can take is probably tryptophan. Tryptophan, an amino acid that is found in high quantities in things like turkey, goes on to create serotonin and then goes on to create melatonin, which helps us sleep. Have you noticed that after a Christmas dinner, when you consume turkey, you feel tired, you sit on the sofa and you have a nap? This is the tryptophan going to work. The amino acid tryptophan is one that I would supplement with, that I would say is safe and effective, or just eat some turkey.
Yeah, I think tryptophan, in terms of dosing, I'll generally tend to say to people around 1 gram, maybe 30 to 45 minutes before bed. It might not work in some cases, depending on the person, simply because they have trouble converting 5-HTP into either serotonin or melatonin. If you're someone that has the inability to convert those things, then yeah, so sorry, tryptophan is better if you can't convert 5-HTP. but some people will recommend 5-HTP, like 50 to 100 milligrams. If you can't convert, then tryptophan, I think, is also good. Some people do look at melatonin. It's a tricky one. Personally, I feel that melatonin, we do make it ourselves. So if you're gonna talk about the dosing of it, it has to be similar to what we use. I know some people talk about like 2 milligrams, 3 milligrams, 10 milligrams, maybe more. But physiologically, if I'm not mistaken, I think we probably produce something like 0.3 milligrams roughly. So what I generally tend to do is to get people to get a tablet that might be like 0.5 milligram or 1 milligram and just break it. So you've got a more physiologically acceptable dose. As well as that, zinc and magnesium before bed, I think tend to work quite well. That's why you get products like ZMA. Just make sure they're in bioavailable forms, like something ending with ATE, like citrate, malate, glycinate, things like that. And also make sure that during the day, you're getting enough sunshine. Make sure that you're getting enough electrolytes in as well. So I take the cherry flavor of Richard's electrolytes, probably about 4 scoops a day now on average. So 2 drinks, and each drink I have, there we go, those ones. So I generally have about 2 sort of half-liter versions of those a day. Each one has 2 scoops. And initially, when I went carnivore, I did have a little bit of trouble sleeping. Once I made sure I got my electrolytes in and I was regular, within a few weeks, I actually got way better sleep than I ever have. And sometimes you've got to ask yourself, actually, do I actually have trouble sleeping? Because on carnivore, I find I just sleep less. I sleep less, but actually I've got more energy when I wake up. And so the first question before you jump to supplements should always be, do I actually have a problem sleeping, or do I just need less now? Which obviously I can't answer, but I think it's something to ask yourself.
Brilliant. Okay.
Love that.
Now, if you're thinking, wow, these guys are really good, that's nice. If you're thinking we're really bad and you're still watching, what are you doing? But anyway, if you do think we're really good, there's something happening on Saturday, the 14th of September and Sunday, the 15th of September. For those that are watching in the future after those dates, it's 2024. Rich, what's happening at that weekend?
Ooh, I don't know. What could this be? The biggest UK event in the history of UK events. It's the first UK Carnivore conference. I know of 2 incredible speakers, that being Stephen Thomas and Dr. Abs. I may be there also. It's an incredible event, 2-day event, food included. It's in the grounds of Cliff College within the Peak District. We've booked the entire venue, so the whole college is booked out to us. I can't wait. It's going to be the first of its kind. It's going to be different to any event that I've been to. It's going to be one with takeaways, i.e. at the end of each presentation, we're going to physically give you, well, on screen, takeaways that can make changes to your life. Plus, for many of us, we're going to be...
I thought you were going to say someone's going to deliver some steak as a takeaway.
There'll be plenty of steak and beef there to eat, I can assure you. So
Steakaways.
Steakaways. The menu is going to be incredible. A lot of the speakers are there for the entire weekend. I know Abs is working away on the Saturday, so you'll be joining us on the Sunday. But everybody else is going to be there. Come along, pick our brains. Come on, and bombard Steve with his blood questions. Come on and bombard Dr. Abs for longevity questions and anything else that you may have. It's an intimate event. It's going to be, as I say, the first of its kind. Absolutely incredible, and I cannot wait.
Any news on Carnivore Cam, whether he's going to be there?
So I've spoken to him by email today. I was hoping to arrange a call before coming on with you. I didn't get time to do that today. But I believe, well, I don't want to say anything. I need to speak to Cam first, but
yeah. Okay. All right. So we're trying to, continually improve the lineup, even though it's fabulous.
So what I will add to this is that, eyebrows are being raised. Everybody wants to be a part of this. Dr. Chafee, as you know, good buddy of all of ours. We've all been on his show. He's been on our show. When he knew that we were doing it, he reached out and wanted to be a part. So he's going to be zooming in on the Sunday for a Q&A. So everybody wants to be a part of this. It's a huge event in regards to its kind. I mean, not huge in regards to numbers. It's going to be an intimate event, but it's one not to be missed. I think if you miss the first, then you're going to regret it for the rest of your days. So make sure you book and come. Tickets are selling fast, and this isn't a sales ploy. You can go onto the website. We're sold out on single rooms. There are a handful. I think there may be 4 or 5 doubles or twins left available. They won't last long. They may even be gone by tomorrow at the rate they go in. But day tickets are still, or weekend and day tickets are still available. But accommodation, you'll have to find yourself. We do have a few preferenced hotels, but tickets are still available. But if you wanted to stay in the grounds, then time is running out.
Right, Rich, can you put a link in the chat for people to have a look at? And we'll also put it in the description of the videos just for people there. I want to thank Cruz for the $10 super sticker. Yeah, of course, the begging bowl's out because we do this free for every single Sunday. We do an hour and a half. So any little contribution really helps. That's really nice. You don't even want a question answered. You just giving us support, so that's wonderful. Jan has donated €5, which is great. Oh, by the way, there's somebody listening in Moscow, which is just brilliant. I love the fact we're all over the world. Jan is asking, is alcohol now right? The next few words are going to change the answer to this question. Okay, is alcohol in copious amounts on a more or less regular basis more dangerous on a high fat, high protein diet? I fast regularly as well to compensate. Right, Jan, copious amounts of anything is dangerous. Okay, firstly, I'm not being facetious. It's the English here we're using. If I said to Abs and Richard, this next 7 days, I'm going to have copious amounts of water, okay, they would not recommend this. So when we talk about dosage as well, it's very common, isn't it, when people say the dosage is the poison, really, anything in large amounts. Now, fasting regularly to compensate isn't necessarily going to be the best thing to do, to be honest. You've got to remember that alcohol is being metabolized in your liver. And yes, your liver is going to be making some fat from some of the contents of what you're eating, but you're already eating high fat, and that's where you're coming from, right? And you're putting that connection together. If you eat carbohydrates, that turns into fat in your liver as well because it's toxic. The amount of sugar your body wants in its bloodstream is literally about a teaspoon of sugar in 5 liters. If you have more than a teaspoon of sugar, your body goes to great lengths to reduce that. And that's why you have insulin that tries to reduce it. But how do we reduce it? We drink more to dilute it. We urinate more to get rid of it. And the liver is very clever, and it says, "Oh, right, we can help out here, and we can make some fat out of this sugar." Now, personally, it's a great question. I think whatever you're doing to compensate is sort of putting a band-aid over a fractured arm or something that's also bleeding. I don't think that's going to help you much. I think you just need to hold back on the alcohol consumption. If you're after optimal health, let's put it in really plain, simple terms. I have never, ever heard anyone come up to me and say, I'm looking after my health, therefore I'm increasing my alcohol intake. I've never heard anyone say, I want to improve my health, I am going to increase the amount I smoke. And I'm not being down on you. I'm really not. I just trying to put it in language that maybe makes you go, oh, wow. Yeah, I need to take this a bit seriously. So if the other guys want to chime in, or we can just go on to the next question. Do you want to add anything? Anyone?
I think you've covered everything.
Yeah, okay. Right. Strange enough, I just yabbered on, and the next question does mention me. Carnivore for 8 years, having chest pain with heart rate increases. Stephen suggested hiatus hernia. At a checkup with the GP, they said I had high cholesterol and triglycerides, angina. Is there a difference in pain? Yes. I'm not a doctor. I don't prescribe or diagnose. We just give you information. So don't take this as a sort of patient-doctor relationship. I am clearly not a doctor. And I've worked in rehab. Yes, I have qualifications. Rich has qualifications. Abs is a doctor, but again, you're not his patient. The similarity in these conditions is they both cause chest pain and discomfort. but the triggers are different. So that's one thing. They both have the same thing where you have difficulty in swallowing. Now, hiatus hernia will come with acid reflux and heartburn, which doesn't mean angina doesn't. These are the commonalities and also the things that are more common with the one thing. You regurgitate, that's with hiatus hernia. You get a lot of belching and bloating, and the symptoms worsen when you lie down or you bend. Whereas with angina, you sort of have like a pressing or squeezing sensation. Again, this is not one-to-one advice. This is generally how you would get differential diagnosis. Shortness of breath. We talked about breath earlier. You get pain in other areas. The classic is the radiation of pain down your left arm, but it can be other places as well. So don't ignore that. Neck, jaw, back. There is plenty of things. Tend not to get that with hiatus hernia. That might be another one. Triggered by physical exertion or stress, you can get that. And you know, there's nothing to take away from that other than they're the differences. If you have chest pain, don't talk to blokes on the internet. Just go to your doctor. You know, get images taken, bloods, and do your own research. I mean, you don't have to accept the first thing that's offered, but I would definitely say it is a serious thing. You need to look into it and get somebody dealing with it, not us. Right. I'm not, by the way, sidestepping any responsibility. You're here to ask a question, so we've given you the answer there. Anyway, great. Next question. Hi, folks. My 84-year-old stepdad had a tumor removed from his bladder, cancer cells found in bladder, so that prostate to be removed or have radiotherapy. Trying to get him keto. Any other advice, please?
Yeah, I think keto carnivore is going to be one of the better options. As we know, all cancer cells are fueled by glucose. The cancer cells lose their ability for oxidative phosphorylation, so they quite literally ferment glucose into other compounds that fuel that cell. Being ketogenic or carnivore, the cancer and tumor cells cannot use ketone bodies in the form of beta hydroxybutyrate for fuel. Get him on keto, lower the carbohydrates. The seed oils, also super important. Everybody misses the seed oils. These cause more inflammation and insulin resistance than carbohydrates do, and they predominate everywhere. They're quite literally everywhere. Eating real food, I think, is the first step. Incremental changes, as we discussed. You could look at supplementation of things like C8 oils and exogenous ketones. Our good friend Andrew Scarborough is a fantastic ambassador for the supplementation of these compounds. So they've helped him. They help him maintain his lifestyle. Just stay toxin free. And coming back to the epigenetic side of things, also, I mean, we've been shown that once we over methylate or under methylate, we can cause implications to the DNA and to the histones that prevent us from accessing certain data that allow us to fight off these pathways. I'm going to do it. This is going to be a big part of my talk, actually, in a couple of weeks. The epigenetic side, along with everything else, is going to be an all-in-one thing. But yeah, can't wait for that. Anybody else want to add anything to that?
I mean, if you're interested, if you really want to go into it, look up Warburg 1923 or Warburg 1924. Otto Warburg was one of the first researchers that really tried to understand the metabolism differences between cancer cells and normal eukaryotic cells. And what we find is there's roughly a 400 times increased requirement for glucose in cancer cells than the normal cells. And so that tells you why Richard is talking about a carnivore or keto option for diet. And for anyone else that's listening, I know this question is actually very, very specific to one person. But actually, it's a really nice question because everyone can take away something from it. When you understand that metabolic change is occurring in cancer cells where they need glucose 40,000% more, that really explains to you in a biochemical and metabolic context why carnivore users, I don't know what the word is, but why carnivore folks, shall we say, I don't know a single carnivore that is properly strict carnivore and has developed cancer. And I know that's a bold claim, but I genuinely have not heard of a single person. So when you realize all cancer cells have the same metabolic target on their backs, it's no wonder that I had not heard of a single cancer case developing on carnivore. So I echo what Richard said, and I would just like to stress what he said and emphasize it even more if possible.
Great. I can answer the next one if you want, very quickly. Carsten, I have high uric acid. A problem. Well, is it? Right. I've seen tens of thousands of bloods, and I have seen high uric acid and the person in absolute rude health, fantastic health. And I've seen people with very low uric acid and gout beyond belief. I've also seen people with high uric acid and gout, and I've seen people with low uric acid and no gout. Uric acid is an antioxidant, and it's there. It has a reason to be in your body. It's only a problem if you've got a problem, and we can associate it with the high uric acid. We want to get to why do you think it's high? Because that's outside the normative ranges. So what's in, we need more context. That's what I'm always going to say. So if you did 150 biomarkers in a full panel for your bloods, we'd probably have a better idea. And also we'd need symptoms. But roughly speaking, you can't say high uric acid is going to cause you gout, because I've seen that. Now, Sean Baker, who's a surgeon, has also said that people have come to him when he's done some surgery, and there's high levels of uric acid in the joint, and they never reported any pain. The surgery was in other areas. So, it's a tough one. I definitely would say it is more about how you present. Right, next thing. Unless anyone wants to add to that, but we got tons of questions.
I would add an advert to that. Stephen has been on my podcast recently, and we discussed exactly this, as well as many other blood markers. So if you are interested in looking at what different blood markers mean and how to actually look at them, which isn't really taught anywhere, Stephen really shows off his expertise in that interview, and that will be probably coming out in a few weeks or so.
Excellent, thank you.
Can't wait for that.
Carno Dane, so I'm assuming from Denmark. What's the best way to lower trigs? Cheers. Triglycerides, for people that don't know what trigs mean.
Number of ways. Grains for me is going to be one of the biggest levers. Grains contain fructans. Fructans break down into fructose. Fructose it becomes, we lose our ability to utilize it correctly, and it's done so through glyphosate. Glyphosate blocks the shikimate pathway. The shikimate pathway is the output of fructose absorption, so it blocks our body's ability to do that. So the fructans in grains for me is one of the biggest contributing factors. Alcohol also, fruit obviously also. We can go to town on many other compounds that we consume on a ketogenic lifestyle, but basically living a ketogenic or carnivore type lifestyle is going to help with that. Yes, coffee can. It can influence it, I believe, through its effect on cortisol. And we can really get into that, but we probably don't have enough time with 13 minutes. But it's to do with damage to the negative feedback loop. Cortisol, we look at, as Dr. Ab said earlier, the stress hormone. And as he rightly says, cortisol carries many benefits within the body. It's there for a purpose, but it's the overexpression of this pathway via the hypothalamus and the pituitary and then the adrenals, which leads to it blocks the negative feedback loop, and it can quite often lead to a positive feedback, which increases cortisol, and all the positive benefits of this go out the window. And basically, in a long roundabout way, can lead to increase in triglycerides. Cortisol management. This is something that I've studied recently, so this is something I've qualified in recently. Cortisol healing. Because I've been working with lots of clients recently who have suffered with cortisol elevated and lack of, which is equally as damaging. Probably a talk for another day. But there are many things that you can do to lower cortisol. Too much training will increase it. So we want to keep the training to less than an hour, 45 minutes ideally. We don't want to be overtraining any one time in the day or in the week. Stress management tools like breath work, mindfulness and meditation, all of these things can help. But maybe we can get, this is probably an episode just for itself. But yes, coffee can influence and so can fruits and vegetables. Go carnivore, consume lots of saturated fats, eat as nature intended, and this should allow you to reduce triglycerides in most cases. There are always cases that will be the opposite, but I believe that this is cortisol related, primarily from coffee.
Brilliant. Okay, I think we've covered that. We've got a question here. Hi, Doc. So I'm assuming that's for Dr. Abs. What's your opinion on beta nicotinamide mononucleotide, or beta NMN, I think people know it as, which is a precursor, by the way, to NAD+, which I think where this is going. Does it work?
Yeah, I'm sure it does. I don't know how much though, and no one knows how much. So a certain amount of NMN will elicit a certain amount of NAD. It's I think impossible, absolutely impossible to come up with a figure of a conversion rate because everyone's metabolism is so different. You absolutely cannot generate that. And I think the only way to do it is to do blood testing on yourself, which even that is not that accurate. Taking a certain amount of the substance and figure out how much it increases for you individually. Because even if a study says, oh, it converts to this much, okay, well, what about me? Not the subject in the study, and you can't measure it. So I'm sure it will increase NAD. Personally, I don't think it will be a huge amount, and I don't know what that amount is exactly. There is a study ongoing in Finland right now, which I've been privy to. It's not published yet, but I can tell you that when you take NAD plus directly, it seems possibly, and we're still discussing this. This is all completely not open to the public yet, but it seems like NAD, when you take it directly, it might not actually be when it's NAD when it's inside you. It might be that it goes inside and then it changes to something else completely, and then back to NAD. There's a flip somewhere. It creates a new molecule which no one's seen before, and I'm trying to figure out what it is. So welcome to my life. Basically, this is why I love my job. But when we take NMN, seems to be that doesn't change in the way that NAD does, and there's possibly here. I'm not saying there is, but more likelihood of you developing diabetes if you don't have it already, if you take NMN versus NAD directly. Now, I say possibly because nothing's been proven. And like I said, this study is still ongoing and we don't know all the answers yet. And I'm trying to figure out what this new molecule is.
Super interesting. I can't wait to see that. Do you know, my opinion on these compounds is that, you know, it's the same as many other supplements we look at. We can see benefits from things like resveratrol and green teas and all these sorts of things. But what is it compared to? If we're comparing this to a sick person or someone who is consuming a standard lifestyle, I believe that it will confer a benefit in the short term via a number of different mechanisms. But when we look at these compounds compared, nobody's ever studied these compounds when we look at a ketogenic or carnivore-based community, because what I believe, and Abs, you can jump in on this if you like, but I believe when we live this lifestyle and we're adapted and we are producing beta-hydroxybutyrate, all of these pathways are upregulated naturally. FOXO3, SIRT1, and NAD+, so on and so forth. All of these things are done through living the lifestyle. So if we were living the lifestyle and consuming this said compound, is it conferring a benefit or is it going to cause damage? What compared to what is confers a benefit? We've got to get that in. That's number 2 tonight. You missed the first one, Steve. It's always compared to what? Lots of these things can confer that benefit if we are sick. But I genuinely believe that when we are thriving and when we are keto adapted, and this is different to being fat adapted, by the way, when we are keto adapted and we were utilizing beta hydroxybutyrate, all of these pathways are upregulated naturally. And then I believe that maybe and potentially adding in supplementation of certain compounds could even cause problems. But I just think living this lifestyle, I believe that we can upregulate all of these pathways through living the lifestyle, and it just cancels out all of these other studies that we look at when it's comparing to people living a standard lifestyle.
Yeah, and I just want to add a real layman's take on what both of you guys have said. The body is notorious for taking something, breaking it down, and rebuilding it somewhere else. I mean, that's how a lot of things get into the system. So when you take iodine, for instance, the body in the tissues would change it to iodide, or it will change T4 to T3. This is what happens. Triglycerides will get broken down to be moved around, then put into the cell. So it's not a cop out. It's just that you can't really trace these things. You can do things like double labeling and all this, but it's really hard to see what you're ingesting, where it goes, and what pathways it goes through. So I think, you know, when you've got an interventional study, that does really help. Anyway, right. Don't want to get into that too much. This is a great question for Abs, I think. What is the, oh, I hate these sort of questions. What is the single best thing you can do for acne?
Carnivore. Very short
Excellent.
answer.
I
It's
agree.
autoimmune. At the end of the day, it's autoimmune, right? What you need to look at, Abu Bakr, is lectins. Look up how lectins can make separations in the gut lining and enter the bloodstream. Once you see that and understand that they can actually mimic our own cells, and like they've got a camouflage, for instance, you understand why autoimmune conditions might be linked highly to lectins. And look up, for instance, the ability for lectins to induce the presentation of what we call class 2 HSA antigens onto cell surfaces, like in the pancreas and the thyroid. And you'll understand why the body starts to attack itself. There's a reason Leonard's 2021, the study found an incredibly high remission or improvement in autoimmune conditions, which previously had no treatment whatsoever, by just going carnivore. So it's not that there's a single best thing you can do. There's a single best understanding of autoimmunity, which will give you the tools to know what to do anyway.
I love that.
Yeah.
Do you know, I used to suffer, many people don't know this, I used to suffer severely with acne and dry skin. In fact, I had this conversation with my 9-year-old little girl today, because when I was growing up, my hands used to split, my skins would split. I had dry skin, I had boils all over my face. I used to wear makeup, genuinely. So I used to, and I covered this in the talk that I give recently at the Ancestral Health. I had boils all over my back. All of this improved massively when I became ketogenic, but completely resolved when I went carnivore. No dry skin, no spots anywhere. If I get spots now, it's to do with training, having gone for a long run, 16 miles or whatever, in baking heat. But they're very, very few and far between. So it's, yeah, I completely agree. It's carnivore.
Rich.
Carnivore's key.
Great stuff. Right. Sherry has kindly done a super chat. I'm a bit late. This is going to be the last question. I put in the live chat for people the link to the school for the next 30 minutes. I will screenshot the questions and we will carry on over there. If you want to join school, it's really simple. Just use that link. Here's the question. I'm a bit late. What is your opinion? What, in your opinion, is more important to grow bone? Oh, come on. To grow bone while staying in medical ketosis, fat or protein? Thank you very much.
Do you want me to jump in quickly? And then you
Yeah,
guys.
Go for it, Rich.
So bone is mineralized protein. The dry weight of bone, it predominates proteins. To send that protein and calcium into the bone, we need sodium. So we need a diet that contains minerals, protein, but particularly sodium. Calcium is obviously important, but we can't build bone without protein. So protein should always be prioritized. In fact, I think from memory, we need protein, phosphate, sodium, and calcium. There are other contributing factors, but those are the three that we cannot build bone without. And studies have shown that we can even reverse osteoporosis when increasing protein to what they regard as high amounts, which isn't even a high amount for a ketogenic or carnivore-based lifestyle. But protein and fat are super important. But for bone mineralization, we need protein and we need sodium.
That's great. So if people are interested in joining the school community, I'm going to quickly show you what it looks like. I'm going to do a screen share so you can see, and then we can get you over there if you want to join and basically carry on listening to what we're doing. Let me just do this very quickly. I think we always run out of time because we try to give you proper answers. That's the thing. So if you are going to quickly look, we'll just share the screen. And here we go. This is what the school looks like if you join. It will look like this. Okay. And we will have you come in here, and that you can go to the calendar, and that you go down here and you click on extra time and you'll be in there. That's all you've got to do. Just while we're on, that's what it looks like. The community is there, the classroom, we've got loads of courses. Wow, loads of free ebooks. You know, that's basically $4 a month, about £3.50 in English money. And it's just amazing. And there's so many members and there's so many things you can do, so many questions you can ask. Anyway, I want to thank the guys for that. Like I say, the link is in the chat. If you want to join school, we're going to be over there now, and we're going to do another 30 minutes extra time. I've done some screenshots of some of the questions, so we should be able to have things to talk about. But of course, our members will also have questions that they have got. As members also, we'll be able to answer those. So thank you so much. Hope you've enjoyed this hour we've done on YouTube. This is on playback. And by the way, if you join school in the week, if you're watching on a playback on YouTube, then you'll be able to see the 30-minute thing, because everything's on there, every single bit of content we do. So guys, I'll see you later. Abs, all you've got to do is go into the school and click on that. Do you know how to get into it?
I'm on it already. I'm on the Zoom already.
Great.
On it like a car bonnet.
Right, everyone, thank you so much. Thank you, YouTubers.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.